feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast, and we are brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Wednesday morning. It's October 30th, and coming up on today's show, we have Wolves beat writer Chris Hine joining us to discuss the Wolves' loss last night against Dallas and a few themes that came out of that one, including some familiar bugaboos popping up. Transition defense, defensive rebounding, and turnovers were all issues in that game. We'll get into what is behind those. I'll also talk about Ant's big 24-point first quarter and how he kind of slowed down after that, maybe what was behind that. Then also some talk on Julius Randle and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, because I thought, while it was a loss, those two continued doing continued the pattern of the positive things that they've been doing thus far this season. But before we bring Chris in, I wanted to put on your radars that Kyle and I will be doing a live show at Treasure Island Resort and Casino on Friday night, November 15th. The Wolves play the Kings that night at 9 p.m. It's a late night game, West Coast tip. So the plan is that Kyle and I will be doing a live show in Treasure Island's Parlay Lounge at 8 p.m., the hour before the game there. The Parlay Lounge has a little stage set up. There's a ton of TVs all over the place there, and it's perimetered sort of by two bars. It's a really cool spot. I went and checked it out when they had me come down there. So it's going to be a fun night. We'll start with a happy hour at 7 p.m. as we're kind of getting ready, say hello and hang out. We'll do the live show at 8 p.m., and then we will be there to hang out and watch that Wolves-Kings game that, again, tips off at 9 p.m. November 15th, the Kings game. Just wanted to get that on your radars, to put it on your schedule in case you're wanting to make a weekend out of it like we are. If you do want to book a hotel at Treasure Island for that evening, I got a notice this morning that they are offering 15% off rooms that night to listeners of the show and attending the live show. To get that 15% off, call this number 1-888-867-7829 and mention code TWOLVE, TWOLVE, no S. I don't know why, but no S. I'll have all this information in the show notes on YouTube or your podcast player. But one more time, November 15th, 7 p.m. happy hour, 8 p.m. live show, 9 p.m. Wolves-Kings game, all in the Parlay Lounge at Treasure Island Resort and Casino. And to get that 15% off a room for that night, if you are wanting to stay the evening, call 1-888-867-7829 and mention code TWOLVE to book. For more information, visit ticasino.com. Today's show is also brought to you by Prize Picks. And I'm going to start giving two NBA Prize Picks when we do episodes during the middle of the week. And my two picks tonight, I chose from the national TV games. Celtics and Pacers play on ESPN, and so do the Spurs and Thunder. So I thought maybe some of you would be watching those games. And the two picks I have from those games is I'm going to say Tyrese Haliburton has less than 7.5 assists in that game. Haliburton has had a slow start with assists thus far this season, 21 assists through the first 4 games of the year. So I'm going to say less than 7.5 makes sense to me there against Boston's defense. And then in the late game, the Spurs game, give me Julian Champagnie to score more than 9 points. I really like Champagnie as a shooter. I think he's one of those capital S shooters. He's taken 6 a game, and he's playing big minutes for this Spurs team. So if you would like to play those two or find some of your own, you can do so at Prize Picks. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players for more or less than a stat, and create your daily fantasy lineup there. If you haven't signed up for Prize Picks before, use the promo code Dane, and they will credit your account with $50 after you create your first $5 lineup.
Hey, yeah.
All right, I am now joined by Wolves beat writer Chris Hine. Chris, last night the Wolves, they lose in a familiar way, right? It's kind of the same issues that have plagued them when they've had their like down stretches of time over the last 2 years. It was the turnovers, it was the defensive rebounding, and it was about the transition defense. We've talked about those things many times over the last 2 years. They turned the ball over 20 times in 96 possessions. Over a fifth of their possessions were turnovers. It only shows 12 offensive rebounds on the stat sheet. I guess only showed there was only 12 offensive rebounds, but they felt costly, right? And then transition defense, it kind of looked and felt like that first Towns Gobert season where oftentimes it was less the big getting back, and it was like, wait, who's got that guy if Rudy's down here? And just general confusion around transition defense. Not that I want to only focus on the negative stuff.
What's the better general confusion or general soreness?
Right.
Which one's the 5-star? Which one's the 4-star general?
Well, general soreness never worked out. General confusion related to transition defense did.
Mm-hmm.
You want to start there? You want to start with transition defense?
Sure. To your point, I was getting flashback to like that early Spurs loss that year against with Cat and Gobert year one.
I remember that.
It looked very much like that, like in the early going, like, yep, we're just gonna run on you even after makes, and you can't stop it. Daniel Gafford having a little party for himself at the rim in the first quarter last night. It's all a product. It feels like all these issues, transition defense, especially because you have to communicate, maybe more so in that area than, let's say the turnovers or the rebounding. I'm not as worried about the turnovers. I think that's just a natural product of this offense figuring it out with some new personnel. So I'm not as worried about that long term. I would be worried about if this is another version of that team or whatever. If they just can't figure out transition defense, that would be a little more worrisome to me. And the rebounding, I don't think, is an easy of a fix either. With the transition defense, it's the same problem. We were asking them last night, what's wrong with it? What's going on? And it's basically like they're.
I got that clip right here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me play that one. Yeah, I thought that was good too.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see most in transition, even semi-transition? It seemed like they got you scrambling a lot and got good looks.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks like we're too worried to get into a specific matchup rather than getting matched up quickly. Happens a lot when teams are switching at a high volume on the other end of the floor. You're not usually guarding the guy who's guarding you. We just got to get to somebody's body.
So sorry, continue, but I did want to,
Sure.
That's Finch's perspective.
I mean, Finch just said exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, right.
But that is the crux of what happened 2 years ago. It's what happened maybe early in the season or at times last year when the transition defense was a problem. But I think what they're going to have to decide here is how many people are you going to have to devote to this versus crashing your own offensive glass, which is the decision they're going to have to make. Last year, they were able to kind of find a balance of being I think an okay offensive rebounding team and being a decent team in transition defense. They want Jaden to crash from the corners. They want him to be a threat on the offensive glass. But if one of your fixes is, okay, Jaden, don't crash the glass anymore, get back.
Yeah.
I think that's, yes, you'll fix your transition defense, but it comes at a cost of potential better offensive rebounding numbers, which if you're playing it out and trying to connect everything together, if they're going to be this high 3-point volume shooting team, there's going to be a lot of chances for offensive rebounds. Right. You're probably going to want to try to get your hands on as many of those misses as you can.
Yeah, I see two things related to it. Finch mentioned the cross matching. But one thing I've noticed that wasn't specific to last night is to the offensive rebounding part, like Rudy's there, right? Like Rudy's trying to go to the basket and be an offensive rebounder. That's a really good skill set he has. But what I think it was the first like transition bucket that Dallas got last night, or one of the first ones, like Daniel Gafford is up, in some like pick and roll with like, or handoff sort of thing with Randle and Edwards. And Randle's up there at the top of the key. Rudy's down there underneath the basket trying to get the offensive rebound. And he doesn't. That Dallas just gets the offensive rebound. And it's just immediate hit ahead pass to Gafford there. And I bring that up because in that situation a year ago, if it was Carl and Ant running the thing at the top of the key, Carl just goes, all right, I got Gafford here. Rudy's underneath the basket. I'm just gonna take the center here for a second. But I've noticed that in numerous games where Randle, understandably, is not wired like a center. Like Carl almost was too wired like a center sometimes, and would almost too often take Rudy's guy as the 5. And we're like, okay, well, no, Carl, like Rudy's got to be guarding the center. But that really helped them, I think, in transition defense when they were, playing against some of those run in the floor 5s who are just trying to get out and get cheapy little dunks like that. I think Randle needs to be able, and Randle can, like he's 6'9", he's 250. Like you just got to hold that for a little bit, go back with him. Rudy's going to get back on D. It's not like Rudy isn't somebody who hustles back on defense and all that sort of stuff. But I've noticed that from a transition defense. I think that's a difference, a specific one to how this roster has changed. And then the other part, the cross matches, I think Dallas, like that, it's really noticeable in that Dallas matchup, right? Because the Wolves don't want Mike Conley guarding Kyrie Irving or Luka Doncic. And they wanted Mike on Klay Thompson. But what's going to happen in a normal possession is like Kyrie is guarding Mike. So if the Wolves miss a bucket, like, and Mike's in the corner, like how is Mike going to be like, wait a minute, Klay's over there? It's just, and sometimes Mike is actually pretty good at like figuring out how to do that, but sometimes it's impossible. And it just leaves them in these overall either cross match.
Yeah. And to your point, like different teams, different personnel, Mike might be more mirroring the guy who's guarding him at the other end of the floor, which makes it all a little easier.
But in the playoffs, when you're playing a Dallas team or a team that can go at Mike, like these are things, again, 78 games from now that you need to have ironed out. But I think that's kind of the crux of that is the Wolves often don't want to match up the way opponents want to match up with them. And sometimes that's just, we want Jaden to guard the best player. Well, Jaden often isn't being guarded by that guy on the other side of the floor. So
I think it's, the thing that I'll be watching out for is if they have to devote more personnel to getting back, whether that's in the short term or the long term here. I think to your point about the miscommunications and to what they were saying, that's a fix that, we'll see if they get remedied over the next couple of games here without having to alter the way that they maybe want to attack the offensive glass. But I think 2 years ago, that is essentially what they did was they especially when I think Carl went out, they just kind of punted on a little bit of the offensive glass in the name of getting back on defense. So, and I don't think that's a trade-off they should make or that they want to make. So that's what I'll be looking out for the next couple games.
Yeah, no, that's good. I think another Carl specific thing here that relates to these issues is the defensive rebounding.
100%.
The defensive rebounding issue is primarily in the minutes that Rudy is off the floor. The Wolves, when Rudy's been off the floor, have only secured 68% of defensive rebounds. If you look at last season, that's worse than Washington, who was worst in the league at defensive rebounding. Obviously, it's only 4 games; it'll normalize a little bit, but point being, 68% is bad. When Rudy's on the floor, they're getting 74% of them, which is the equivalent of 8th last season in defensive rebounding rate. So obviously, the issue isn't with Rudy on the floor. It's when they take Rudy off and it's Reed and Randle as the front court, which makes some sense given it's a size decrease. I don't think either of those guys are true centers. But I thought Ant had an interesting answer, kind of X's and O's wise, why that happens. Here's Ant.
Have to rebound against different players this year. Cat's not getting more, and he was a very good rebounder. As guards, do you have to rebound differently?
Yep, got to rebound more. I mean, especially when when Rudy's not in the game, when we go to the Black 15 group where we switch them 1 through 5. Usually they're gonna call Nas and Jew up, and it's gonna be me and Mike and Dante and Kill at the bottom of the floor. We just got to be more physical, more tough, box those big motherfuckers out.
I mean, Chris, we've heard that exact answer before.
That last part of the quote did not make it into my story today.
Did it? I think a lot of this is just Ant turning that on in his head. And I think that's even like I could see him being like, oh, I know that was, I mean, he said as much.
Yeah.
But when they've had, again, if we're doing thematically here, when this has been an issue over the past couple of years, what Finch has talked about, or what Ant has talked about, is he needs to do more there. And I think if I'm Ant and they do have Rudy off the floor and you are switching 1 through 5, like that light bulb has to go on for Ant, that I need to be a rebounder here. And I understand he's got to save energy here and there, but that is worth the energy points, just because they're limited in terms of rebounding with that group.
Well, that's just it. I think he had 6 boards last night, which isn't a terrible number when you look at it just in a vacuum. But I think Dante had 2. I think Mike might have had 2 or 3. And so it's kind of like I don't think Jaden had a great rebounding night either.
Jaden had 4, but 3 were offensive.
But Jaden's also guarding, trying to guard these guys who are shooting from the perimeter. So that's
good note. I always do.
You always have to take his rebounding numbers with a grain of salt, but it is a familiar problem. I mean, it's the same exact thing they've been harping on for 2+ years. Again, it's not the big's fault necessarily. It's the smalls that have to be more cognizant, filling in the lane, boxing out. And here's another thing where, okay, you want to play a certain style, right? We've heard the Wolves want to get out and transition more, right? Well, you can't have 2 mindsets, I feel like, especially if you're trying to switch back and forth. Like, you either have to be a team that's gonna commit all 5 guys in these situations, perhaps, to the defensive glass, or you're going to be a team that's going to try to take a little bit of a gamble and get more out in transition, right? And if last night is any indication, you might have to, again, make a little risk-reward analysis here and say, oh, well, we can't really get out in transition because we got to make sure we get the ball in the first place.
Yeah.
And the second half last night was a great example of why they may need to think about that trade-off, maybe a little more seriously than they think about the transition defense trade-off, I think.
Yeah, it's just we've done the trade-off thing before too, right? It's the toggle thing. It's like, all right, they're up when Cat is in, and then they drop when Rudy's in. And in these stylistic shifts, and what it seems like, they're doing now is when Rudy is off. Last night they switched everything. They were playing a lot of zone in the Reed Randle minutes in the past, or in the previous games, and I just think like. It requires that awareness of like turning the light bulb on and doing these things. And I just think the last few years have taught us that it's easier said than done to be intentional about that. Yes. Right. I mean, are you like, it's
100%.
It's been that way. So I don't know. I just think it might even be more glaring from a rebounding and defensive perspective, in particular with it needing to be Naz and Randle at the 5, because I mean, now we're seeing for the last 2 years, we've seen very few of Naz's minutes at the 5, right? I'm not very few, but like significantly less than the 4 or maybe even the 3. And he's skinnier. He's just smaller than when he was playing the 5 before, 2-3 years ago. He doesn't have that like physical like force to him. And then kind of surprising to me, it's Randle really doesn't seem to ever play center, or really have that, like, I'm going to be the physical one. I'm the tent pole of the defense here. They did go to small ball and Randle played center some in the fourth quarter, I know, last night. But I just think we're doing a new type of toggle here, and they're figuring that out. And what we learned in the past was that takes a while to figure out,
right?
Flipping different switches on and off from Rudy to not Rudy. And I'm curious, given that they've learned from this stuff before, how long of a process it will be. We should give them time, obviously. My hope would just be, or their hope, I'm sure, is that it would come together, quicker than it did that first Cat and Gobert year where they're acclimating, and it like almost never really came together of how to play that way. Carl got hurt and everything. But that's going to be a big telling thing of like, when does this click, and how do the minutes work when Rudy's off the floor. That, like, Nas was always going to be an X factor on this team. I just think that has grown because we have been like, that's important. The 20 minutes or 16 minutes a night that Rudy's off the floor, a lot goes on Nas because he has to play center. He has to play transition defense. He has to defensive rebound. He needs to not turn the ball over like a young player. Like, we're like, all right, Nas, you get the opportunity of no cat. Like, you know, with great opportunity comes great responsibility, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying Nas is failing at that. It's just over 4 games that's being highlighted to me for sure.
Well, I mean, the rebounding in each of their 2 losses has been a problem. It was an issue for stretches in that Lakers game, and it was an issue especially in the second half last night.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, looking at some of the rebounds that they got, it was really just at times. I don't know, at least a couple of them were not the smalls. It was just Derek Lively just going over Nas's back, not like in a foul sense, but like
he just went over Rudy's back in a foul sense.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But I remember there was like 1 or 2 very clearly where he just got it. Like he just got it over Nas.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it wasn't even close.
Right.
You know, so that's, again, we're finding what not the tangential effects of this trade, or the areas where, you know, we previously thought that they were secure, that they're not as secure in anymore, because Cat is a different type of player when you make this kind of switch, with giving Nas more responsibility and having a smaller Julius Randle in there.
Yeah.
And I know Randle is taking it upon himself to rectify some of that, and maybe that comes with time as he, you know, again, figures out more of where he belongs in this grand scheme of things and all the different lineups that they may have him in, whether it's a small ball 5 or whether it's playing alongside Nas for stretches. So maybe he gets a little better, or gets a little better feel for where he needs to be defensively and
that's a good point. He hasn't gone through this before.
Right.
We're talking about this team has gone through it before. Like, I think that's just like Finch of, you know, some kind of reprioritization. Back to what you were saying before. Maybe if you're just Finch and you go, all right, Julius, until we get some of this defensive rebounding stuff like a little bit more handled, how about the only time you really get out in transition is when you grab the defensive rebound unit yourself and you go, like, no leaking out. And DiVincenzo too, he probably is like, oh wait, we need all 3 of the guards to rebound.
Right.
Like, that wasn't something we needed.
Well, that's
New York
exactly
before,
it.
Right?
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly what, you know. I wonder what they'll be discussing in film when they talk about this, if there is any change, because I do think that was an issue in the first game for stretches. I don't think it was an issue overall. Again, the Rudy minutes not as much, but it was an issue for stretches in that Lakers game as well. So, you know,
Nas did have 13 boards in the Kings game.
Yep.
You know,
yep.
and that was, you know, part of the reason they won that. Last thing of the, I don't know, the issues last night. Turnovers, 20 of them. Nas had 5, Ant had 5. Do you have anything that you point to there other than, you know, sloppiness?
Yeah, I think it was just kind of one of those nights in a way with the turnovers, and I just think you're going to have this early in the season. This is, I think, to be expected more than the other 2 issues that we were talking about. It's not to just write it off, but
well, the other 2 issues we can point to specific things like we just did. In this one, and I haven't rewatched the game. I mean, maybe something will stand out to me, but I was just like, I don't know, it's just kind of bad passes. Yeah,
exactly. It was just kind of exactly. It was bad passes. It was loss of focus or whatever. I mean, I left thinking that the offense wasn't in terrible shape after last night's game.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's improved a lot since last week or the first game at least.
Sure.
So it was just kind of one of those nights where if you were a little more on that end of the floor, you have 5 fewer turnovers, and maybe this was kind of exactly it just left me with the same feeling of what happened in the Western Conference Finals, where it's like, oh, well, the Wolves left the game thinking, well, if we just did this a little better, if we did this a little better, we would have won the game by 7 instead of losing by 6,
Right.
But it's like, okay, well, they've done this to you now many times. So is it something that you're doing? Is it something that they're doing? Is it a combination of both? Why can't you seem to play your best against this particular opponent? Why are they always the one that make you play at 85% of what you can play? And then that's the margin. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe you have to ask yourself that question a little more seriously if you get matched up against them.
Is Christmas the next time they play them?
I believe so. Yeah. I don't think Dallas is here again until later in the season, or
if
maybe
that
this was
at all.
it, or maybe this is
it.
weren't
we talked about this yesterday? Maybe it'll be.
I think they're
tournament?
they might be an in-season tournament candidate if the Wolves don't make it to the. Yeah, they might be the home game. I think because I think Dallas is only here once, so that could be the home game of the in-season tournament week if they don't make it. So yeah.
I mean, it'll be an interesting one to track. I mean, this is the Denver of a year ago, right?
Right.
Where it's like it's the team you get bounced by in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. What do you have for them? What did you not have for them? And to the Wolves' credit, last season they put that together against Denver, and obviously ultimately came out on top there. It is a little murky though. I think in this matchup right now for the Wolves of like what exactly does that look?
Well, I think this matchup is just the example of great offense trumps great defense in the NBA.
Yeah.
And we saw that in the playoffs last year. And you see it any possession that Jaden or somebody is guarding their ass off for 20 seconds of the shot clock, and then Luka just takes a fadeaway 16-footer and it goes in, or he gets a cheap foul at the end of the shot clock, and then they get an offensive rebound, after you do play good half-court defense for 24 seconds.
Right.
It really does show you that, yes, you can play as great a defense as you want when you have two otherworldly players out there on the floor.
Yeah.
If they are on, you are not stopping them. That's just how it is.
Right. Let's grab our first break to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And you've heard me talk about Adriana before and what she has to offer in the home buying or home selling process. Again, we're just putting this on your radar, and also reminding you that if you do sign up for a free consultation with Adriana, a free strategy session, that you'll be entered to win some free tickets. So as however many of you sign up for a strategy session with Adriana, one will be entered to win some. One listener will get some lower level tickets to a game this season. You do need a realtor in your process of buying or selling your home, and Adriana is certified in both Minnesota and Wisconsin. So if you want more information for signing up for that free strategy session, go to thedancingrealtor.com, or you can call or text her at 715-304-9920. Today's show is also brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. And if you already do have a home, right, Your Home Improvement Company can help you in your process of, making that adjustment to your home, that improvement that you need, maybe this fall or before winter comes. A popular thing they get done in the wintertime is their full bathroom renovations. Can be a simple tub to shower conversion. That's a 30% off deal they have going this month for whatever your process is that you need go to in your renovation for your bathroom. They also have a deal on windows that is buy two, get two free if you want to get that done before things get drafty this winter and cold. Hit up Your Home Improvement Company there. Whatever the project is, Your Home Improvement Company offers great financing deals that require zero money down, zero interest, and zero payments until 2026. Contact Your Home Improvement Company by calling 866-777-YHIC, or you can just go to yourhomeimprovement.co.com. Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. Chris, let's talk about Ant. And the start of the game, which was obviously incredible, 24 points in the first quarter there. And I think he made 6 threes. Just the first real Ant explosion of the season. As unfortunately it happened in other games last year where he exploded. He kind of rolled his ankle and then it stopped, I asked him after the game about it. He kind of downplayed the ankle or whatever. And he pointed at, some of the other guys started making shots and this and that. What do you, I don't know. Like it's so hard to be hard on the guy who finished the night with 37 points on, effective shooting, but it's 24 in the first quarter, 0 in the second, 5 in the third, and then 8 in the fourth. I don't think he made another 3 until that fourth quarter. Yeah. Is this, is it asking for too much to be like, oh man, it feels like they needed more out of Ant when he had 37, but it kind of feels that way.
Well,
too, right?
Like you said, it was just a weirdly rhythmed game for him. It's weird, and it's weird when the boomlet comes in the first quarter as opposed to say the third quarter, right? We're more used to seeing those things come later in the game, not right out of the gate. It's if it was reversed, we probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about it. It would be like, oh well, that was a Ant started slow, and then the third quarter he comes out and hits 6 threes or whatever, right? So it was just kind of it was almost a typical Ant game, just in reverse order in some ways,
right?
I don't know what caused the lack of I don't want to say aggression.
I did. I think it was the ankle. He rolled his ankle. Like,
I don't know if I'm buying that. That doesn't stop him from chucking up threes. I don't know. Maybe it stops him from going to the basket, but he was hitting from deep.
But maybe that's what he needed to do. Maybe he loosened it up by hitting all those threes at the beginning, and then needed to. I remember just talking to some people at halftime. It was like, because that's the whole conversation. I was like, whoa, the Wolves shoot a lot of threes. And And I'm like, yeah, that's cool if it's like also a part of a setup to then, get downhill.
A little more.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where I would point to the ankle. But whatever, like if he's not saying it, it's an issue.
When did he twist? When did he
like a minute left in the first. First. Okay. And then apparently I saw somebody else on Twitter say then he like stepped on Gafford's foot again later. And maybe he redid it, but it was a play where Ant was like running underneath the basket. Julius was driving, and he kicked it Nah in the corner, and then like Ant and Julius's feet got kind of wrapped up, and Ant kind of rolled his ankle there. That was the first one. But
that's right.
I don't know.
I thought it was interesting that. And maybe the ankle, maybe this is related to the ankle. We had heard Finch at practice the day before talk about needing to just bring Ant's minutes down, a little bit because he was playing like 40.
Yeah.
That opening week. Just trying to bring that down a little bit. So I thought it was interesting that on a night when Ant scores 24 points in the first quarter, Finch didn't go to him a little earlier in the second quarter. And he kind of waited until halfway through the second quarter.
Good call.
Like, so if Ant comes back at, let's say, the 9-minute mark as opposed to the 6.5 mark, is it different? Is that extra 2.5 minutes? Did that sap whatever sort of energy or whatever he had going early by sitting
the hot
longer?
Hand cool. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
It
felt like that, right? It felt like it was a while before we saw Ant again on the floor. And when somebody's got a night like that, where you might be going for 50 or 60 based on your start, you usually coaches might leave them out there a little longer or bring them back a little earlier than they normally would because it is that kind of a night. So I was a little surprised that Finch. I think it's a smart thing overall to not play Anthony Edwards 40 minutes a night. You need to do that. I just thought it was interesting and maybe a little last night might not have been the night I started that, especially coming off of 2 off days and then with 2 off days after this. Like he could get his rest in if you play him that extra 4 or 5 minutes.
Well, that's what's funny. Is he played 37 minutes and he did sit the first half of the second quarter.
Yeah.
So it's like if he does come in at the 9-minute mark, that's your
40
right
minutes.
There.
That's your 40,
so
right?
Like,
exactly.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think you nailed it. Like it was the heater, wanting to manage the minutes, and something with the ankle to some extent. I mean, again, he downplayed it in the locker room, but we all saw him grabbing at his ankle, leg, retying his shoes over and over again. I don't know, man. It's been a lot of semi-tweaked ankles for Ant over the last 3 years. A lot of them.
To plug the book again, his football coaches will tell you about all the tweaked ankles and things that he that he had once upon a time as a kid to try to get out of extra running in football practice and things like that. So I think this is kind of baked into who he is at this point. Like,
I mean, how many times have we seen him crash to the floor, look dead? And
absolutely,
then,
it's a joke now, kind of among the team when that happens. It's like, oh yeah, we know it's going to be fine 5 minutes later.
It's a joke and also impressive because some of those,
right?
The Milwaukee one where he like fell from the roof and landed.
That one actually ended up costing him a few games. I think in the aftermath of it.
I think he came back in that game.
He came back in that game, but I think he missed like one or two.
Hit point
after that. But I think in like the Memphis series, he had one where he thought his season was over, and then he's obviously back out there in 5 minutes. But that's the thing I guess we don't really realize with him is we see that he appears to be in a lot of discomfort or pain. We ask him how he feels after the game. He always says he's fine. So we don't really know how much this stuff might be bothering him in the moment, after the fact, whatever, right? We don't really know. And then maybe you get an instance like the knee thing 3 years ago,
right,
where maybe he says, oh, it actually was kind of really bothering me there for a second.
Right. I've done plenty on the 3-point volume and shooting and stuff like that. I don't think switching his shot selection, I don't think we've talked about it. Just briefly.
By the way, we have a national narrative forming around this morning. I don't know if you've been checking
No,
Twitter.
I have not. Why?
Anthony Edwards shooting too many threes is bad for the game because he needs to be going to the rim more. That seems to be the national consensus take right now from NBA take havers at a national level. So
awesome.
I'm
sure they watched the game.
Turning Anthony Edwards into Klay Thompson is a bad thing for the NBA. Is the takes or the takes.
He leads the league in 3-pointers attempted, 3-pointers made, and is shooting 41.5%. I think we got to save that take until
it falls off a little bit, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is weird. It is in all. There's an actual like basketball conversation to be had about it. Of like, like where do you find that balance? 53 3-point attempts and 37 twos. Is weird. It's different. I mean, he's shooting like last year. Last year he was shooting 30% of his shots from three. This year, thus far, he's shooting 60. I think you asked him afterwards, like, is this a good number? You feel comfortable with it? He's like, yeah, they're gonna let me shoot them, so I'm gonna make them. Like so.
And this is what people don't realize about Anthony Edwards either. Yes, he gets to the rim and it's exciting and it leads to awesome dunks. But the one thing in his life and in his career that he has wanted to prove to people over and over and over again is that he is a good shooter, that he is more as a basketball player than just somebody who gets to the rim. So that's what I would tell people that are having these kind of takes is like, you don't realize that this is what Anthony Edwards wants to do. He wants to be known as a great shooter, a great shooting guard. And with that comes being a great shooter. So this is him trying to fulfill this mission that he has had for years, dating back to high school days, that he wants to be a great shooter. Yes.
Remember the scouting reports? Dion Waiters. Because I think Ant shot like 27.8% from three in college.
Yes, so
something like that, right?
Yeah, remember all those comps about him being a chucker and empty shot, empty points, all that stuff, and now he's taking and making too many threes 5 years into his career. Look how far he's come, right?
I don't get why the conversation wouldn't be he's clearly improved as a shooter,
right?
And now can be a high volume shooter. Yeah, like sometimes, and part of me thinks there does need to be some of a balance here too. And like the Sacramento game, I think that that's fine that he was shooting so many and not getting downhill because they were bringing two up every single time. They
And
said
then
a straight forehand,
look
two on the
what
ball.
happened.
Like,
And then look what happened on the last possession of the
Exactly.
game. He got to the rim
Mhm.
and got to the foul line, and they
Yeah.
won the game.
But
So,
last night
yeah.
he didn't do that. So that
He did not do
that's
that
fair.
last night. That's fair. That's fair.
That didn't happen last night. So I get, it's not, that one's on national TV. And they didn't win. So, it's got to point to something. I mean, clearly our opinion or mine of how I'm shaping this conversation off of the game is the story of that game of why they lost it is because they turned the ball over, couldn't play transition defense, and couldn't defensive rebound. I don't think it was because Ant shot too many threes, but
Right.
there's just going to be more of that stuff this season. Let's move to Julius Randle. I was about to say, Chris, can you guess who leads the team in assists this season? But I think I just tipped my hand.
Is it Julius Randle?
20 for Julius.
This was an easy game show.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Where the host gives you the answers right ahead of the question. Boy, Jeopardy was like that.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
I was last night. I think I liked it the most. His playmaking and just really seeing those. I mean, how many times did Finch say, Julius is going to be able to have those drives and whip around passes for 3-point shooters all season. He said that over and over again in training camp. And he just really puts a lot of mustard on those. He gets in there and he's like, pump. Okay, it's not there. Zip to
Julius
Dante
Randle might be a good quarterback, or he could probably throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball or something like that.
Some heat.
There's some heat.
Yeah, I just think that's worth noting. That piece of it, as there's a lot of things that this team is adjusting and will need to add and yada 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 as they figure out the fit of Randle in particular. The playmaking and finding shooters on the perimeter element of the Julius Randle integration that's already working. And I think that's worth us noting there. I mean, he's always got a little bit of forcing it to his game, but I think it was his first assist last night. It was right in front of us in the media section. He tried to go at Derek Lively and he kind of got to the block, tried to get him a couple pump fakes, and Lively was just staying there, kind of had him. And he reached around Lively and threw it to DiVincenzo in the corner there, threw it with his left hand around Lively, and Dante hit it in the corner. I'm like, okay, that's good to see him not try and force that up and through Lively and flail his arms out. I think there's been a level of discipline to the way that Julius has drove and playmake that is necessary for being a primary playmaker, but not the primary playmaker on this team.
Well, I think the word intentional is what comes to mind. Everything that he does in those situations is very intentional, and it's very calculated, whether it be the taking his time to back somebody down, seeing what's there. I mean, it's not quick, but it seems like there's a purpose behind what he's doing when he's doing this stuff, right? And he's not afraid with 2.5 left on the shot clock, and you're sitting there thinking okay, he's got to put up probably a terrible shot here, right? And then he zips a pass to the corner, and somebody's taking an open three as the shot clock is expiring. This is kind of what, like you said, Finch had told us was going to happen, and it is happening. And I don't think it's a bad thing for the offense overall. I thought it looked pretty good at times last night. It's sometimes I think you're probably on pins and needles watching it because you're like, what is he doing? What is he doing? But then when you see that he sees the open guy and he's able to get it there, it feels a little better after you see that happening. So I think, it's going to be something that I think Wolves fans and us in the media, at least me, it's like you have to know that he knows what he's doing when he's in these 8 to 9 second what's the word I want? Slogs, I guess you could say in the post.
Slow ISOs.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it may not look always the best, but it seems to end up, at least last night I thought most of those
Yep.
possessions ended up okay.
Yeah,
in the
7
end.
assists, led the
Yeah.
team in assists last night. I think part of the Randle leading the team in assists is probably more an indictment of Conley and Ant than it is a credit to Julius at this point. I mean, 18 for Conley, who's really struggled in all 4 games. That's not enough. They need him to be that and a 3-point shooter. He hasn't been doing those things. And then the 14 number from Ant in 4 games doesn't feel like enough either. Was that, not even
Right.
not even 4 a game, 3.5 a game.
Probably
that's not
tied
enough.
into the amount of threes Ant is taking. I mean,
Right.
if he's not looking to get downhill as much, he's not going to be playmaking as much. So.
Right. And that is what he said last night was like, my guy started hitting shots and he did kind of seem to start passing more last night after that big first quarter. But yeah, you're right. That probably just plays into the balance. The most effective balance of whatever that ends up being of 3s versus 2s for Ant. In that balance, a positive externality off of that is he's setting teammates up for clean, easy shots. And we're having a conversation like we just did about Julius. Like, oh, Ant is drawn 2, and this is, when he's getting downhill and he's just finding, DiVincenzo hit 6 threes last night and 5 of them were from Ant, that's where that needs to get to. But yeah, Randle is picking up some of that slack right now.
Yeah, it's I'd be interested to see like where Ant is on kind of the scouting reports. Like, is he is he one of the guys where once he catches it, you got to be up on him, or because of his driving ability, do you back off?
Right.
But like now that he's shooting well, like do players have to, are they told now to come up more on him? Like, if you're guarding him one-on-one, I'd be interested to see if any of that.
Is he a touch guy or is he a flush guy?
Right, exactly. Touch versus flush. Those were the terms I was looking for. I wonder what that is.
Yeah, I mean,
I wonder what it was last year, and I wonder what it might be now.
Good luck if Anthony Edwards is a flush guy.
Right.
That's just one dribble and you're gone. Like,
but I mean, if you're guarding him, you have to. If you're giving up something, right, you don't want to get burned going to the hoop. You'd rather him take a 3 where you can maybe get a bit of a hand in his face, as opposed to him burning by you and going to the rim. So now, as he's making 3s at a higher volume, does that change the calculus of opposing defenses in the future here, where we actually have to take that extra step, or be up on him a little.
I don't know
closer.
if it changes it, but it's a problem for them. That's a problem for them if you got to be thinking about that. And then it's on Ant and on Finch and the team to be like, all right, this is a problem that teams have when they're facing Anthony Edwards. How do we exploit that? And we're probably, just because we're 4 games in, like, are just diagnosing that that's a problem for the other teams. And now, like, let's see him, let's see him capitalize on that, and see where that can go and how Ant can benefit by being a shooter and a playmaker and a downhill guy. Like, right, that's the strike 1, strike 2, strike 3 of where they need to get to. Last guy, Chris. We've talked a lot about Nikhil this year, but he's really impressed me. I want to play this Finch clip on Nikhil from after the game last night.
Walker, I think he's closed multiple games this season. Off the top of my head, I don't think he did that much last season. What is he doing to earn that?
He's playing well on both sides of the ball. Making shots at a high level. He's guarding the ball. Today he was our best, option to guard multiple dudes out there. So I think we said that we're going to close with different guys, and I felt like he was playing well enough to earn that.
He's played really well in all 4 games. We can talk about that, Chris. He seems so critical to me in this Dallas matchup, in an ability to guard both Luka and Kyrie. Kyrie had a great game last night. I thought Nikhil made it the toughest on him. And, he's the guy that I would think of if you get in a playoff series and Mike is having struggles. and you make a shift in that playoff series into changing the starting lineup, I think it would be Nikhil and it's starting versus closing. I mean, they closed with him, and they've closed with him multiple times because he is delivering on what his assignment is every single night. And that assignment is particularly important, when you're playing a team with Luka and Kyrie. It'll be important on Friday when you're playing against Jamal Murray. It was important against De'Aaron Fox. He is earning a bigger role on this team, a team that everyone's freaking out about not having enough minutes for other guys behind him. I'm watching these games and I'm like, I don't know.
It's because he's playing so well, right? Let him cook, as the kids say.
Right.
So with him, I think Finch's comments before the Toronto game were awesome about Nikhil. And in that, he said something that I hadn't considered coming into the season. And I think we all had thought that the DiVincenzo addition meant maybe some bad things for Nikhil.
Yeah, dude.
And his confidence and whatever, right? But Finch put it in another light where it's like, no, it actually recalibrated his role in a positive direction, where it's like, you don't have to be as much of a playmaker. You don't have to be a point guard. Just do what you do well. Like last season, Dante can now handle a lot of the playmaking coming off the bench, and you can just be the best version of yourself that we know you can be without adding too much more to your plate, which is the ideal version of Nikhil Alexander-Walker that this team needs. And it has turned out great for him and the team over the first 4 games this season, because he picked up exactly where he's left off last year. And you're right. What was their most effective lineup in that fourth quarter when they went small with him out there? Right.
Yep.
And he was on fire, playing great defense, and he earned to be in the closing rotation. And yeah, that was, he's been great. And I think we didn't think the DiVincenzo addition meant good things for him, but it's turned out it has, actually.
What's funny now too? You know what happened a lot last night? Nikhil played point guard a lot.
Yeah, that's true.
Brought it up, in a good way.
True.
It was like, rather than being like, which he did in preseason, like, feel this need, I have to be point guard, I have to play make, I have to create, I need to fill in for Mike here. We need more. He had this nervous energy around that. Finch talked to him as he, and said, nope, we got plenty of guys who can play point guard. That doesn't need to be your thing. Focus on your main thing. He did that in games 1, 2, and 3. And then last night I thought, in the situations that are just going to naturally come up with, like, they deny the ball and then the 2 guard ends up bringing it up. Nikhil did that multiple times. And have we had anything in our mind? I'm sure Nikhil's had turnovers and stuff, but it hasn't been like the preseason where he's just at the top of the key, like trying to create and gets ripped and they're going the other way. Like, Nikhil, when he's being tasked with bringing the ball up or initiating the offense, he's just doing it simply, like, let's get up into it, pistol, here we go, come on, and let's just go. And the flow
right, to your point, it's simple, it's not trying to do too much, which is
exactly what he was doing last year.
Keep it simple. And that is the mantra for him, is just don't do too much, stay within yourself, stay within the system, just make the right plays. If you are bringing the ball up, don't try to be some hero out there trying to create too much for everybody. Because what you do well is more than good enough for what this team needs. So
nailed it. He's been the only player to play well in all 4 games. I guess it's also kind of a little way we should know. Rudy had his worst game of the season. I would say Rudy had played really well in his first 3 games. I thought Rudy struggled more in this one than that. I would have said they were the 2 who came in being like, oh yeah, they're both clicking on all cylinders coming into that Dallas game, or had 3 pretty good games. Rudy struggled a little bit, but Nikhil's 4 for 4. Like, what is he at 70% from 3? Like, that's going to come down. That's going to come down some, but just again. And I know I keep talking about him on every episode. It's why I try to tuck it into the back of this one, but it can't not be acknowledged because
right. All right.
it's so meaningful. The plus minus bears out the net. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this guy is going to, the first month. I mean, we're 2 weeks in. Like when we finally start looking at numbers, like lineup data and stuff like that from month, in a month or whatever, I think Nikhil's going to lead the team in plus minus, or net rating. And he has a job. He does the job. The job is meaningful, and he's even exceeding the expectations of that. And for an eighth man, he's not an eighth man. That guy's a starter.
Right.
Like
right.
On a lot of, watching League Pass and stuff, right? You turn on a Nuggets game. Could that team use Nickeil Alexander-Walker? Yeah.
There's a lot of teams.
A lot of teams. Yeah.
I often said the Lakers could really use him.
I
thought that watching the playoffs last year.
Mm-hmm.
And good for him if he can keep this up in a contract year.
Yeah.
For somebody whose NBA future he thought was very much in doubt 2 years ago when he got traded here. And now he's, setting himself up very nicely to cash in next summer, whether it's here or with somebody else.
Yeah. And obviously, there's for the Wolves, and we'll talk about all that stuff later. There's the 3-prong element of the Randle player option.
Sure.
Nas player option, Nickeil unrestricted free agency. But, I just kind of went into the season being like, it's probably Nickeil is the one who falls off the ship next season in terms of just as the salary cap does. But, he is making a case through 4 games that he is critical to this team. And I think particularly as we are, seeing Mike Conley not be the same exact Mike Conley, I think when they're eventually making that decision about bringing Nickeil back, where Mike Conley is at and what you can or can't expect out of him a season from now. Well, Mike's under contract next season, but it's, partially guaranteed. Like where Mike is at, I think will factor in to how important Nickeil is, in the long term of this, of this project.
100%.
You got anything to plug?
Nothing really to plug. We're just finishing up the book over the next few weeks, and I don't know when a pre-order link or anything will be out, but we'll be sure to blast it out there and talk about it when it is. But hopefully that's coming up in the next couple of months here.
Awesome.
And as always, just subscribe to the Star Tribune, and the response for the last year has been great. People love reading the coverage, obviously, especially in the postseason. But journalism requires money, unfortunately. So give us money, please.
Yeah, there you go. And as the as the season does start going along, and John and I don't travel to as many games. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I have one more thing. We are going to be starting a Timberwolves newsletter soon, like in a week or two, at the Star Tribune, and that's free to your inbox.
Okay, cool.
So when that comes up, we'll talk about it, links, all that stuff. But be on the lookout for a Timberwolves dedicated newsletter that'll be crafted by me once a week in your inbox. So
remind me to, if that's up next week, remind me to plug that when we have when we have Chris on, and like I've been saying to you listeners, like the loose plan every week is Jace on Mondays, Chris on Wednesdays, Britt on Thursdays, Kyle on Fridays. As the season goes on, and Chris, we were talking about this last night in the media room of figuring out some stuff when you're traveling or I'm traveling. It's not going to always be perfectly lined up like that, but we'll try and have Chris on middle of the week at least every week, and get the other guys in there as well. For the rest of this week, just for listeners, we're going to do a Brit pod tomorrow, but we're going to push Kyle to the beginning of the beginning of next week, just because it doesn't really make sense for us to do a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday pod when the Wolves don't play any more games between Tuesday and Friday. So we're trying to stick to a schedule, but sometimes it just, I think, makes sense for you, the listener, for us to move some things around. But Chris, I appreciate you being here on a Wednesday morning.
No problem. Thank you for having me as always.
StarTribune.com for Chris's work, and you can follow him on Twitter at Christopher Hine if you are just looking for a place to go and read all of his coverage. He's tweeting out or retweeting all his links there. That's always a good place. I always say, Twitter is my newspaper now, where you follow your writers.
Such a depressing thought, though.
Sorry, dude. It's 2024.
I know.
Hey, I'm saying you're in my newspaper. Your newspaper is in my newspaper.
I appreciate that.
I read it.
That.
I read it.
Absolutely.
So I just think for everybody who's following the Wolves, and we're all of us on the beat are very active on Twitter, so it's a great place to to get links to all of our content. And Chris's you can find there at Christopher Hine. Like I said, next up is Britt and I on that'll come out on Thursday afternoon. I know he's writing a column, I think, on Julius Randle today. So Britt and I will get into that, and maybe a little bit around the NBA sort of stuff. Been watching some League Pass and want to talk about the league. It's easy to fall really deep into our Wolves bubble, but I also want to talk a little bit about what's going on, at least in the Western Conference, around the Wolves. So we'll have that tomorrow with Britt. Until then, he's Chris. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you